Hello everyone, and welcome. Welcome back to another reading stream with me, Mike. And this evening, we are going to be reading Chapter 9 of The Wind in the Willows. We're nearly at the end of the book now. We're actually getting very close to the end. This will be the penultimate stream, so we've only got one more stream of this to catch up with chapters 9 and 10. Sorry, 10 and 11. And then that is the end. I have seen some of you suggesting stories that we can continue reading and stuff that we can go on to do, so I will certainly look into that. But hello everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I hope you're all having a lovely day and a fantastic start to your week. As I say, we're going to dive in today with Chapter 9 of our continued story, The Wind in the Willows. Just to say, I've very much enjoyed reading this for you. I know that these streams don't get an awful lot of engagement, but I know that there's a few of you who enjoy sitting and listening to me read bedtime stories, and I certainly enjoy it too. So, if you want to, hit the like button. It definitely helps. It helps a lot. And yeah, if you're new to the channel and you want more of this, then please do feel free to subscribe, because I would like to do more of this. But yeah, until then, chat, I hope that you are sitting comfortably. I hope that you are, that you have a drink of choice, or perhaps you are tucked up in bed and getting ready to go to sleep. So, if so, in any of those cases, sit back, relax, as we continue with Chapter 9, Wayfarers All, in the Wind in the Willows. Enjoy. The water rat was restless. He did not know exactly why. To all appearances, the summer's pomp was still at its fullest height, and although in the tilled acres green had given way to gold, through rowans and reddening, and the woods were dashed here and there with a tawny fierceness, yet light and warmth and colour were still present in undiminished measure, clean of any chilly premonitions of the passing year. But the constant chorus of the orchard and hedges had shrunk to a casual, even song from a few yet unweird performances. The robin was beginning to assert himself once more, and there was a feeling in the air of change and departure. The cuckoo, of course, had been silent, but many another feathered friend, for months apart from the familiar landscape and its small society, was missing too, and it seemed that the ranks thinned steadily day by day. Rat, ever observant of all winged movement, saw that it was taking daily a southing tendency, and even as he lay in bed at night, he thought he could make out, passing in the darkness overhead, the beat and quiver of impatient pinions, obedient to the peremptory call. Nature's grand hotel has its season, like the others. As the guests one by one pack, pay and depart, and the seats at the table d'hors shrink pitifully at each succeeding meal, as suites of rooms are closed, carpets taken up, and waiters sent away, these boarders who are staying on en passant until the next year's full reopening cannot help being somewhat affected by all these flittings and farewells, this eager discussion of plans, routes, and fresh quarters, this daily shrinkage in the streams of camaraderie and comradeship. One gets unsettled, depressed, and inclined to be querulous. Why this craving for change? Why not stay on quietly here like us and be jolly? You don't know the hotel out of season. And what fun we have amongst ourselves, we fellows who remain and see the whole interesting year out. All very true, no doubt. Others always reply, we quite envy you, and some other year perhaps, but just not now. We have engagements, and there's a bus at the door. Our time is up. And so they depart, with a smile and a nod, and we'd miss them and feel resentful. The rat was a self-sufficing sort of animal, rooted to the land, and whoever went, he stayed. Still, he could not help noticing what was up in the air, and feeling some of its influence in his bones. It was difficult to settle down to anything seriously with all this flitting going on. Leaving the waterside, where rushes stood thick and tall in a stream that was becoming sluggish and low, he wandered countrywards, crossed a field or two of pasturage already looking dusty and parched, and thrust into the great sea of wheat, yellow, wavy, and murmurous, full of quiet motion and small whisperings. Here he often loved to wander, through the forest of stiff, strong stalks that carried their own golden sky away over his head. A sky that was always dancing, shimmering, softly talking, or swaying strongly to the passing wind and recovering itself with a toss and a merry laugh. Here, too, he had many small friends, a society complete in itself, leading full and busy lives, but always with a spare moment to gossip and exchange news with the visitor. Today, however, though they were civil enough, the field mice and harvest mice seemed preoccupied. Many were digging and tunnelling busily. Others gathered together in small groups, examined plans and drawings of small flats, seated to be desirable and compact, and situated conveniently near the stores. Some were hauling out dusty trunks and dress baskets, others were already elbow-deep packing their belongings, while everywhere else piles and bundles of wheat, oats, barley, beech mast and nuts lay about, ready for transport. "Here's old Ratty," they cried as soon as they saw him. "Come and bear a hand, Rat, and don't stand about idle." "What sort of game are you up to?" said the Water Rat severely. "You know, it's time to be thinking of winter's quarters yet, by a long way." You know it isn't time to be thinking of winter's quarters yet, by a long way." "Oh yes, we know that," explained a field mouse rather shamefacedly, "but it's always as well to be in good time, isn't it? We really must get all our furniture and baggage and stores moved out before those horrid machines begin clicking round the fields. And then, you know, the best flats get picked up so quickly nowadays, and if you're late, then you have to put up with everything. Oh, you have to put up with anything. And they want such a lot of doing up to, before they're fit to move into. Of course, we're early, we know that, but we're only just making a start." "Oh, bother start," said the Rat. "It's a splendid day. Come for a row or a stroll along the hedgerows or a picnic in the woods or something." "Well, I think not today, thank you," replied the field mouse hurriedly. "Perhaps some other day, when we've more time." The Rat, with a snort of contempt, swung around to go, tripped over a hat box, and fell with undignified remarks. "Oh, if people were more careful," said the field mouse rather stiffly, "and look where they're going, people wouldn't hurt themselves and forget themselves. Mind that hold, old Rat. You better sit down somewhere. In an hour or two we may be more free to attend to you." "You won't be free, as you call it, much this side of Christmas, I can see that," retorted Rat grumpily, as he picked his way up out of the field. He returned somewhat despondently to his river again, his faithful, steady-going old river, which never packed up, flitted, or went into winter quarters. In the osiers which fringed the bank he spied a swallow sitting. Presently it was joined by another, and then by a third, and the birds, fidgeting restlessly on their bough, talked together earnestly and low. "What, already?" said the Rat, strolling up to them. "What's the hurry? I call it simply ridiculous." "Oh, we're not off yet, if that's what you mean," replied the first swallow. "We're only making plans and arranging things, talking it over, you know, what route we're taking this year, and where we'll stop and so on. That's half the fun." "Fun?" said the Rat. "Now that's just what I don't understand. If you've got to leave this pleasant place and your friend who will miss you and your snug homes that you've settled into, why when the hour strikes, I have no doubt you'd go bravely and face all the trouble and discomfort and change and newness, but make believe that you're not very unhappy. But to want to talk about it or even think about it till you really need... You don't understand, naturally," said the second swallow. First, we feel it stirring within us, a sweet unrest. Then back come the recollections one by one like homing pigeons. They flutter through our dreams at night, they fly with us in our wheelings and circlings by day. We hunger to inquire of each other, to compare notes and assure ourselves that it was all really true, as one by one the scents and sounds of names and long-forgotten places come gradually back and beckon to us. "Couldn't you stop on this year?" suggested the water rat wistfully. "We'll do our best to make you feel at home. You've no idea what good times we have here, and while you're far away." "I tried stopping on one year," said the third swallow. "I'd grown so fond of the place that when the time came, I hung back and let the others go on without me. For a few weeks it was all well enough, but afterwards, the weary length of nights, the shivering sunless days, the air so clammy and chill. And not an insect in an acre of it. No, it was no good. My cottage broke down one cold stormy night I took wing, flying well inland on account of the strong easterly gales. It was snowing hard as I beat through the passes of the great mountains, and I had a stiff fight to win through, but never shall I forget the blissful feeling of the hot sun again on my back as I sped down the lakes that lay so blue and placid below me, and the taste of my first fat insect." Thank you very much, Milo, for your 14 months. I appreciate you, man. Hello to Edinburgh. "The past was like a bad dream. The future was all happy holiday as I moved southwards week by week, easily, lazily lingering as long as I dared, but always heeding the call. No, I had my warning. Never again did I think of disobedience." "Ah, yes, the call of the South, twittered the other two dreamily. Its songs, its hues, its radiant air. Oh, do you remember?" And forgetting the rat, they slid into passionate remembrance while he listened, fascinated, and his heart burned within him. In himself, too, he knew that it was vibrating at last, that chord hitherto dormant and unsuspected. The mere chatter of these southern-bound birds, their pale and second-hand reports, had yet power to awaken his wild new sensation and thrill within him through and through with it. What would one moment of the real thing work in him? One passionate touch of the real southern sun, one waft of the authentic odour. With closed eyes he dared to dream a moment of a full abandon, and when he looked again, the river steamed steely and chill, the green fields grey and lightless. His loyal heart seemed to cry out for his weaker self, for his treachery. "Why do you come back at all, then?" he demanded of the swallows jealously. What do you find to attract you to this poor, drab little country?" "And do you think," said the first swallow, "that the other call is not for us too in this due season? The call of lush meadow grass, wet orchards, warm insect-haunted ponds, and browsing cattle, of haymaking, and all the farming clusters around the house of the perfect eaves." "Do you suppose," asked the second one, "that you are only... Do you suppose," said the second one, "that you are the only one living thing that craves with a hungry longing to hear the cuckoo's note again?" "In due time," said the third, "we shall be homesick once more for quiet water lilies swaying on the surface of an English stream. But today, all that seems pale and thin and very far away. Just now our blood dances to other music." They fell a-twittering amongst themselves once more, and this time in their intoxicating babble of violet seas, tawny sands, and lizard-haunted walls. Restlessly the rat wandered off once more, climbed the slope that rose gently from the north bank of the river, and lay looking out towards the great ring of downs that barred his vision further southwards. His simple horizon hitherto, his mountains of the moon, his limit behind which lay nothing he had cared to see or know. Today, to him gazing south with a newborn need stirring in his heart, the clear sky over their long outline seemed to pulsate with promise. Today, the unseen was everything, the unknown the only real fact of life. On this side of the hills was now a real blank. On the other lay the crowded and coloured panorama of his inner eye was so So, oh my lord, I'm really struggling today, and I don't know why. God, dyslexia is such a trip. Let's try that again. On this side of the hills was now the real blank. On the other lay the crowded and coloured panorama that his inner eye was seeing so clearly. What seas lay beyond, green, leaping and crested? What sun-bathed coasts along which the white villas glittered against the olive woods? What quiet harbours thronged with gallant shipping bound for purple islands of wine and spice, islands set low in languorous waters? He rose and descended the river once more, then changed his mind and sought the side of the dusky lane. There, laying half buried in the thick, cool underhedge tangled and that bordered it, he could muse on the mottled road and the wondrous world that it led to, on all the wayfarers too that might have trodden it, and the fortunes and adventures that they had gone to seek or found unseeking, out there, beyond. Footsteps fell on his ear, and the figure of one that walked somewhat wearily came into view, and he saw that it was a rat, and a very dusty one. The wayfarer, as he reached him, saluted with a gesture of courtesy that had something foreign about it, hesitated for a moment, and then, with a pleasant smile, turned from the track and sat down by his side in the cool herbage. He seemed tired, and the rat let him rest unquestioned, understanding something of what he was in his thoughts, knowing too the value all animals attach at times to mere silent companionship, when the weary muscles slacken and the mind marks time. The wayfarer was lean and keen-featured, and somewhat bowed at the shoulders. His paws were thin and long, his eyes much wrinkled at the corners, and he wore small gold earrings in his neatly set, well-shaped ears. His knitted jersey was one of faded blue, his breeches, patched and strained, were based on a blue foundation, and his small belongings that he carried were tied up in a blue cotton handkerchief. When he had rested a while, the stranger sighed, snuffed the air, and looked about him. That was clover, that warm whiff on the breeze, he remarked. And those are cows we hear cropping in the grass behind us and blowing softly between mouthfuls. There's a sound of distant reapers, and yonder rises a blue line of cottage smoke against the woodland. This river runs somewhere close by, for I hear the call of the moorhen, and I see by your build that you're a freshwater mariner. Everything seems asleep and yet going on all the time. It's a goodly life that you lead, friend. No doubt the best in the world, if only you are strong enough to lead it. Yes, it is the life, the only life to live, responded the water rat dreamily, and without his usual wholehearted conviction. I did not say that, replied the stranger cautiously, but no doubt the best. I've tried it, and I know. And because I've just tried it, 6 months of it, and know it's the best, here I am, footsore and hungry, tramping away from it, tramping southwards, following the old call back to the old life, the life, which is mine and which will not let me go. Is this, then, yet another of them, mused the rat. And where have you just come from? He asked. He hardly dared to ask where he was bound for. He seemed to know the answer only too well. Nice little farm, replied the wayfarer briefly. Up along in that direction. He nodded northwards. Never mind about it. I had everything I could want. Everything I had any right to expect in life and more. And here I am. Glad to be here all the same, though glad to be here. So many miles further on the road, so many hours nearer to my heart's desire. His shimmering eyes held fast on the horizon, and he seemed to be listening for some sound that was wanting from the inland acreage, vocal as it was with the cheerful music of pasturage and farmland. You're not one of us, said the water rat, nor yet a farmer, nor even, I should judge, of this country? Right, replied the stranger. I'm a seafaring rat, I am, and the port I originally hail from is in Constantinople, although I am a sort of foreigner there too, in a manner of speaking. And you will have heard of Constantinople, friend, a fair city and an ancient and glorious one, And you may have heard too of Sigurd, King of Norway, and how he sailed thither with 60 ships, and how he and his men rode up through streets all canopied in their honour with purple and gold. Now the Emperor and Empress came down and banqueted with him on board his ship. When Sigurd returned home, many of his northern remained behind and entered the Emperor's bodyguard, and my ancestor, the Norwegian-born, stayed behind too, with the ships that Sigurd gave the Emperor. Seafarers we have ever been, and no wonder. As for me, the city of my birth is no more my home than the pleasant port between there and the London River. I know them well, and they know me. Set me down one of their quays or foreshores, and I am home again. I suppose you go great voyages, said the Water Rat with growing interest. Oh, months and months outside of land, and provisions running short, and allowances as to water, and you mind commuting with the mighty ocean, that sort of thing. Oh, that was Rat. Oh, boy. Oh, by no means, said the Sea Rat frankly. Such a life as you describe would not suit me at all. I'm in the coasting trade and rarely out of sight of land. It's the jolly times on shore that appeal to me, and much as any seafaring. Oh, these southern seaports, the smell of them, the riding lights at night, the glamour. Well, perhaps you've chosen the better way, said the Water Rat, but rather doubtfully. Tell me something of your coast-steering, then, if you have a mind, and what sort of harvest the animals of spirit might hope to bring home when it's too warm for his latter days with gallant memories by the fireside. Ah, for my life, I confess to you, feels to me today somewhat narrow and circumscribed. My last voyage, began the Sea Rat, that landed me eventually in this country, bound with high hopes, my inland farm, as well as will serve as good example of any of them, and indeed as an epitome of my highly coloured life. Family troubles, as usually begun it. The domestic storm clone was hoisted, and I shipped myself on board a small trading vessel bound for Constantinople by classic seas whose every wave throbs in the deadness of a memory. Throbs with a deathless memory. To the Grecian islands and the Levant. Those were golden days and balmy nights. In and out of harbour all the time, old friends everywhere, sleeping in some cool temple or ruined cistern during the heat of the day, feasting and song after sundown, under great stars set in a velvet sky. Thence we turned the coast up the Adriatic, its shores swimming an atmosphere of amber, rose and aquamarine. We lay in wide landlocked harbours, we roamed through ancient and noble cities, until at last one morning, as the sun royally rose behind us, we rode into Venice, down a path of gold. Ah, Venice, it's a fine city, wherein a rat can wander at his ease and take his pleasure. Oh, where, weary of wandering, can sit at the edge of the Grand Canal at night, feasting with his friends, and when the air is full of music and the sky full of stars and the lights flash and shimmer on the polished steel prows of the swaying gondolas, packed so that you could walk across the canal from them from side to side. And then the food. Do you like shellfish? Well, we won't linger over that now. He was silent for a time, and the Water Rat silent too, and unenthralled. Floated on dream canals and heard a phantom song pealing high between vaporous grey wave-lapped walls. Southwards we sail at last, continued the Sea Rat, coasting down the Italian shore till finally we made Palmero, and there I quitted for a long, happy spell on shore. I never stick too long on the ship. No one gets narrow-minded and prejudiced. Besides, Sicily is one of my happy hunting grounds. I know everybody there, and their ways just suit me. I spent many jolly weeks in the island, swaying with friends up country, and when I grew restless again I took advantage of a ship that was trading to Sardinia and Corsica, and when I was very glad to feel the fresh breeze and the sea spray in my face once more. But isn't it very hot down in the hold, I think you call it? Asked the Water Rat. The seafarer looked at him with suspicion of a wink. Oh, I'm an old hand, he remarked with much simplicity. The captain's cabin's good enough for me. It's a hard life by all accounts, murmured the Rat, sunk in deep thought. For the crew it is, replied the seafarer gravely, again with the ghost of a wink. From Corsica, he went on,
I made use of a ship that was taking wine to the mainland. We made a lasso in the evening, lay to, hauled up our wine casks and hove them overboard, tied one and the other on a long line, and then the crew took the boats and rowed shorewards, singing as they went, drawing after them the long bobbing procession of casks, like a mile of porpoises. On the sand they had horses waiting, which dragged the casks and stepped up steep street to the little town with a fine rush and clatter and a scramble. When the last cask was in, we went and refreshed and rested, and sat late into the night drinking with our friends. And the next morning I took great olive woods for a spell and a rest. And now I'd done with islands for the time, and ports and shipping were plentiful. So I led a lazy life among the peasants, lying and watching and work, or stretched high in the hillside where the blue Mediterranean far below me. And so at length, by easy stages and partly on foot, partly on sea, to Marseille, and the meeting of the old shipmates, and the visiting of great ocean-bound vessels and feasting once more. Talk of shellfish, why sometimes I dream of the shellfish of Marseille, and I wake up crying. Oh, that reminds me, said the polite water rat. You happened to mention that you were hungry, and I ought to have spoken earlier. Of course, will you stop and take your midday meal with me? My hole is close by, and it's some time past noon, and you are very welcome to whatever there is. Now I call that kind and brotherly of you, said the sea rat. I was indeed hungry when I sat down, and even since I inadvertently happened to mention shellfish, my pangs have been extreme. Oh, but couldn't you fetch it along out here? I'm none too fond of going under hatches unless I'm obliged to. And then, while we eat, I could tell you more concerning my voyages and the pleasant life I had. At least, it is very pleasant to me, and by your attention I judge it commands itself to you. Whereas if we go indoors, it's 100 to 1 that I shall presently fall asleep. It is indeed an excellent suggestion, said the water rat, and hurried off home, where he got out the luncheon basket and packed it a simple meal, in which, remembering the stranger's origin and preferences, he took care to include a yard of long French bread, a sausage out of which the garlic sang, some cheese which lay down and cried, and long-necked straw-covered flask wherein lay bottled sunshine shed and garnered from on far southern slopes. Thus laden, he returned with all speed and blushed for pleasure at the old seaman's commendations of his taste and judgment, as together they unpacked the basket and laid out the contents on the grass by the roadside. The sea rat, as soon as his hunger was somewhat assuaged, continued the history of his last voyage, conducting his simple hearer from port to port of Spain, landing him at Lisbon, Oporto, and Bordeaux, introducing him to the pleasant harbours of Cornwall and Devon, and so up the channel to the final quayside, where landing after winds long contrary, storm-driven and weather-beaten, he caught the first magical hints and heralding of another spring, and fired by these, had spied on a long tramped inland, hungry for the experiment of life on some quiet farmstead, very far from the weary beating of any sea. Hello, Jem. How are you doing? Spellbound and quivering with excitement, the water rat followed the adventure league by league, over stormy bays, through crowded roadsteads, across harbour bars on racing tide, and winding rivers that hid their busy little towns round a sudden turn, and left him with a regretful sigh planted by his dull inland farm, about which he desired to hear nothing. By this time their meal was over, and the seafarer, refreshed and strengthened, his voice more vibrant, his eye lit with a brightness that seemed caught from some faraway sea beacon, filled his glass with the red and glowing vintage from the south, and, leaning towards the water rat, compelled his gaze and held him, body and soul, while he talked. Those eyes were of the changing form-streaked grey-green of leaping northern seas. In the glass shone a hot ruby that seemed the very heart of the south, beating for him who had courage to respond to its pulsation. The twin lights, the shifting grey and the steadfast red, mastered the water rat and held him bound, fascinated and powerless. The quiet world outside their rays receded far away and ceased to be, and the talk, the wonderful talk, flowed on. Or was it speech entirely, or did it pass at times into song? Chanty of the sailors waiting the dripping anchor, sonorous hum of the shrouds and tearing northern Easter, ballad of the fisherman hauling his nets at sundown against an apricot sky, chords of guitar and mandolin from gondola, or... I don't know what that word says, and I don't want to attempt it because it sounds like a really bad word, so I'm just not going to say it. Did it change into the cry of the wind, plaintive at first, angrily shrill as it freshed, rising to a tearing whistle, shrinking to a musical trickle of air from the leech of the bellying sail? God, I am really struggling with reading this. This is written in a really weird way. Or, I don't know, maybe it's just getting to me. Apologies, chat. I'm trying my best, I promise. All these sounds the spellbound listener seemed to hear, and with them the hungry complaint of the gulls and the sea mews, and the soft thunder of the breaking wave, the cry of the protesting shingle. Back into speech again it passed, and with beating heart he was following the adventures of a dozen seaports, the fights, the escapes, the rallies of comradeships, the gallant undertakings. Or he searched islands for treasure, fished in still lagoons, and dozed day long on warm white sand. Of deep-sea fishing he heard tell, and mighty silver gatherings of the mile-long net, of sudden perils, noise of breakers on a moonless night, or the tall bows of a great liner taking shape overhead through the fog, of the merry homecoming, the headland rounded, the harbour lights opened out. The group seemed dimly on the quay, and cheerily hailed the splash of the news of the hawser, the trudge up the steep little streets towards the comforting glow of red-curtained windows. Lastly, in his walking dream, it seemed to him that the adventurer had risen to his feet, but was still speaking, still holding him fast with his sea-grey eyes. "And now," he was softly saying, "I take to the road again, holding on southwards for many a long and dusty day, until at last I reach a little grey sea town I know so well, that clings along a steep side of the harbour. There, through dark doorways, you look down flights of stone steps, overhung by great pink tufts of valerian and ending in a patch of sparkling blue water. The little boats that lie tethered to the rings and stanchions of the old sea wall are gaily painted, and those I clambered in and out of in my own childhood. The salmon leap on the flood tide, schools of mackerel flash and play past quaysides and foreshores, and by the windows of the great vessel glide night and day, up their moorings or forth in the open sea. There, sooner or later, the ships of all seafaring nations arrive, and there, as it is destined hour, the ship of my choice will let go its anchor. I shall take my time, I shall tarry and bide, till at last the right one lies waiting for me, warped into the midstream, loaded low, her bowsprit pointing down harbour. I shall slip on board my boat or along shore, and then, one morning, I shall wake in the song and tramp of the sailors, the clink of the capstan, the rattle of the anchor chain coming merrily in. We shall break out the jib and the foresail and the white houses on the harbour side, while will glide slowly past us as she gathers steering way, and the voyage will have begun. As she forages towards the headland, she will clothe herself with canvas, and then, once outside, the sounding slap of great green seas as she heeds the wind pointing south. And you, will you come too, young brother? For the days pass and never return, and the south still waits for you. Take the adventure, heed the call. Now here in the irrevocable moment passes. 'Tis but a banging of the door behind you, a blithesome step forward, and you are out of the old life and into the new. Then some day, some day hence. Jog, come here, if you will, when the cup has been drained and the play has been played, and sit down on your quiet river with a store of goodly memories for company. You can easily overtake me on the road if you are young, and I am aging and go softly. I will linger and look back, and at last I will surely see you coming, eager and light-hearted, and with all the south in your face. The voice died away and ceased as the insect's tiny trumpet dwindles swiftly into silence, and the water rat, paralyzed and staring, saw at last but a distant speck of the white surface of the road. Mechanically he rose and proceeded to repack the luncheon basket, carefully and without haste. Mechanically he returned home, gathering together a few small necessities and special treasures he was fond of, and put them in a satchel, acting with slow deliberation, moving about the room like a sleepwalker, listening ever with parted lips. He swung the satchel over his shoulder, carefully selected a stout stick for his wayfaring, and with no haste, but with no hesitation at all, he stepped across the threshold just as Mole appeared at the door. "Why, where are you off to, Ratty?" asked the Mole in great surprise, grasping him by the arm. "I'm going south with the rest of them," murmured the Rat in a dreamy monotone, never looking at him. I wish they put the directions first. "I'm going south with the rest of them," murmured Ratty in a dreamy monotone, never looking at him. "Seawards first, then on shipboard, and so to the shores that are calling me." He pressed resolutely forward, still without haste, but with doggedly fixed of purpose. But the Mole, now thoroughly alarmed, placed himself in front of him and looked into his eyes, and saw that they were glazed, and set, and turned, and streaked, and shifting grey. Not his friend's eyes, but the eyes of some other animal. Grappling with him strongly, he grabbed him inside and threw him down and held him. The Rat struggled desperately for a few moments, and then his strength seemed to suddenly leave him, and he lay still and exhausted, with closed eyes trembling. Presently the Mole assisted him to rise, and placed him on a chair, where he sat collapsed and shrunken into himself, his body shaken by a violent quivering, passing in time into a hysterical fit of dry sobbing. Mole made the door fast, threw the satchel into a drawer and locked it, and sat down quietly on the table with his friend, waiting for the strange seizure to pass. Gradually, the Rat sank into a troubled doze, broken by starts and confused murmurings of things strange and wild and foreign to the unenlightened Mole, and from that he passed into a deep slumber. Very anxious in mind, the Mole left him for a time and busied himself with household matters, and it was getting dark when he returned to the parlour and found the Rat where he had left him, wide awake indeed, but listless, silent and dejected. He took one hasty glance at his eyes, found them, to his great gratification, clear and dark, and brown again as before, and then sat down and tried to cheer him up and help him relate what had happened to him. Poor Ratty did his best by degrees to explain things, but how could he put into cold words what had mostly been suggestion? How recall, for another's benefit, the haunting sea voices that had sung to him? How to reproduce at second hand the magic of the seafarer's 100 reminiscence? Even to himself, now the spell had broken and the glamour gone, he found it difficult to account for what he had seemed some hours ago the inevitable and only thing. It is not surprising, then, that he failed to convey to the Mole any clear idea of what he had been through that day. To the Mole, this much was plain. The fit, the attack, had passed away, and he had left him sane again, though shaken and cast down by recollection, but he seemed to have lost all interest for the time in things that went to make up his daily life, as well as all pleasant forecastings of the altered days and doings that a changed season was surely bringing. Casually, then, with the seeming indifference, the Mole turned his talk to the harvest that was being gathered in, and towering wagons and their straining teams, the growing ricks the large moon rising over bare acres dotted with sheaves. He talked of the reddening apples around and the browning nuts, of jams and preserves and distilling of cordials, till by easy stages such as these he reached to midwinter, his hearty joys and its snug home life, and then he became simply lyrical. By degrees, the rat began to sit up and join in. His dull eye brightened, and he lost some of his listing air. Presently, the tactful mole slipped away and returned with a pencil and a few half-sheets of paper, which he placed on the table at his friend's elbow. "Oh, it's quite a long time since you did any poetry," he remarked. "You might have a try at it this evening instead of, well, brooding over things so much. I've an idea that you'll feel a lot better when you've got something jotted down. It's only just the rhymes. Even if it's only just the rhymes." The rat pushed the paper away from him wearily, but the discreet mole took occasion to leave the room, and when he peeped in again some time later, the rat was absorbed and deaf to the world, alternately scribbling and sucking the top of his pencil. It is true that he sucked a good deal more than he scribbled. Oh, for God's sake. What? But it was joy to the mole to know that the cure had at least begun. Oh my God. Oh boy. Right then, and so ends chapter 9. God, every time I read a chapter of this, we learn so much more than I think it actually is. Oh boy. Okay. Alright, well, here we are, chapter 10. We are approaching the penultimate chapter quite quickly. And for those of you who have just joined, this is actually going to be the penultimate stream of The Wind in the Willows, because we've only got 2 chapters after this, so enjoy this one, and we'll take a break till next week, and then we will continue with more Wind in the Willows. Chapter 10, The Further Adventures of Toad. The front door of the hollow tree faced eastward, so Toad was called at an early hour, partly by the bright sunlight streaming in on him and partly by the exceeding coldness of his toes, which made him dream that he was at home in bed in his own handsome room with the Tudor window on a cold winter's night, and his bedclothes had gotten up, grumbling and protesting that they couldn't stand the cold any longer, and had run downstairs to the kitchen to fire and warm themselves. And he had furrowed on bare feet along miles of icy stone-paved passages, as arguing and beseeching them to be reasonable. He would probably have been aroused much earlier, had he not slept for some weeks on straw over stone flags, and almost forgotten the friendly feeling of thick blankets pulled up well around his chin. Sitting up, he rubbed his eyes first at his complaining toes. Next, wondered for a... Oh my lord. Sitting up, he rubbed his eyes first at his complaining toes next, wondering for a moment where he was, looking round for familiar stone wall or little barred window, and then, with a leap of heart, remembered everything. His escape, his flight, his pursuit, remembered first and best thing of all, that he was free. Free! The word, and then the thought, alone, were worth 50 blankets. He was warm from end to end as he thought of the jolly world outside, waiting eagerly for him to make his triumphal entrance, ready to serve him and play up to him, anxious to help him and to keep him company, as it always had been in days of old before misfortune fell upon him. He shook himself and combed the dry leaves out of his hair with his fingers, and, his toilet complete, he marched forth into the comfortable morning sun. Cold but confident, hungry but hopeful, all nervous terrors of yesterday dispelled by rest and sleep and frank and heartening sunshine. He had the world all to himself that early summer morning. The dewy woodland, as he threaded it, was solitary and still. The green fields that succeeded the trees were his own to do with as he liked. The road itself, when he reached it, in that loneliness that was everywhere, seemed like a stray dog to be looking anxiously for company. Toad, however, was looking for something that could talk, and could tell him clearly which way he ought to go. It is all very well when you have a light heart and a clear conscience and a money in your pocket that nobody's scouring the country for you and nobody's scouring the country for you to drag you off to prison again, to follow where the road beckons and points, not caring whether. The practical Toad cared very much indeed, and he could have kicked the road for its helplessness since when every minute of it was of importance to him. The reserved rustic road was presently joined by a shy little brother in the shape of a canal, which took its hand and ambled along by its side in perfect confidence, but with the same tongue-tied, uncommunicative attitude towards strangers. "Oh, bother them," said Toad to himself, "but anyhow, one thing's clear. They must be both coming from somewhere and going to somewhere. You can't get over that, Toad, my boy." So he marched on patiently by the water's edge. Round a bend, and in the canal, came plodding a solitary horse, stooping forwards as if anxious in thought. From rope traces attached to its collar stretched a long line, taut, but dripping with his stride, and further part of it dripping pearly drops. Toad let the horse pass, and stood waiting for what the fates were sending him. With a pleasant swirl of quiet water at its blunt bow, the barge slid up alongside him, its gaily painted gunwale level with the towing path. Its sole occupant, a big stout woman wearing a linen sunbonnet, one brawny arm laid along the tiller. "Nice morning, ma'am," she remarked to the Toad as she drew up level with him. "I dare say it is, ma'am," responded Toad politely as he walked along the towpath abreast of her. "Oh, I dare say it's a nice morning to them that's not in sore trouble, like what I am. Here's my married daughter. She sends off to me post-haste to come to her at once. So off I comes, not knowing what may have happened or be going to happen to her, but fearing the worst, as you will understand, ma'am, if you're a mother too. And I've left my business to look after itself, and I'm in the washing and laundering line, you must know, ma'am. And I've left my young children to look after themselves, and a more mischievous and troublesome set of young imps doesn't exist, ma'am. And I've lost all my money and all my way. And as for what may be happening to my married daughter, well, I don't like to think of it, ma'am." "Where might your married daughter be living, ma'am?" asked the barge woman. "Oh, she lives up to the river, ma'am," replied Toad, "close to a fine house called Toad Hall that's shores hereabouts in these parts. Perhaps you may have heard of it." "Toad Hall? Why, I'm going that way myself," replied the barge woman. "This canal joins the river some miles further down, a little above Toad Hall, and then it's an easy walk. You come along the barge with me. I'll give you a lift." She steered the barge close to the bank, and Toad, with many humble and grateful acknowledgments, stepped lightly on board and sat down with great satisfaction. "Toad's luck again," thought he. "I always come out on top." "So you're in the washing business, ma'am," said the barge woman politely as they glided along. "And a very good business you've got too, I dare say, if I'm not making too free in saying so." "Oh, finest business in the whole country," said Toad airily. "All the gentry come to me. Wouldn't go to anyone else if they were paid. And they know me so well. You see, I understand my work thoroughly and attend to it all myself. Washing, ironing, cleaning, starching. Makes up gents' fine shirts for the evening wear. Everything's done under my own eye." "But sure you don't do all the work by yourself, ma'am?" asked the barge woman respectfully. "Oh, I have girls," said Toad lightly. 20 girls or thereabouts, always at work, but you know what girls are like, ma'am. Nasty little... Oh my God, what? That's it? That's in this book? What the... Oh, okay, well, it's written down, I guess. Nasty little hussies, that's what I call them. "So do I too," said the barge woman with a great heartiness. "But I dare say you set yours to rights, the idle trollops." What the fuck? "Are you very fond of washing?" "Oh, I love it," said Toad. "I simply dote on it. Never so happy as when I've got both arms in the wash tub." But then it comes so easy to me. No trouble at all. A real pleasure, I assure you, ma'am. Well, what a bit of luck meeting you, observed the bargewoman thoughtfully. A regular piece of good fortune for the both of us. But what do you mean? Asked Toad nervously. Well, look at me now, replied the bargewoman. I like washing too, just the same as you do. And for that matter, whether I like it or not, I have to go and do all of mine on my own. Naturally, moving about as I do. Now, my husband, he's such a fellow for shirking his work and leaving the barge to me, that never a moment do I get for seeing my own affairs. By rights, he ought to be here now, either steering or attending to the horse, though luckily the horse has a sense enough to attend to himself. Instead of which, he's gone off with the dog, to see if they can pick up a rabbit for dinner somewhere. Says he'll catch me up at the next lock. Well, that's as may be. I don't trust him. Once he gets off with that dog, who's worse than he is. But meantime, how am I supposed to get on with my washing? Oh, never mind about the washing, said Toad, not liking the subject. I'll try and fix your mind on the rabbit. A nice fat young rabbit, I'll be bound. Got any onions? Oh, I can't fix my mind on anything but my washing, said the bargewoman. And I wonder you can be talking of rabbits with such a joyful prospect before you. There's a heap of things of mine that you'll find in a corner of the cabin. I'll just take one for you, or two. If you'll just take one or two of the most necessary sort, I won't venture to describe them to a lady like you, but you'll recognise them at a glance, and put them through the wash tub as we go along. Why, it'll be a pleasure to you, as you rightly say, and a real help to me. You'll find a tub handy too, and soap, and a kettle on the stove, and a bucket to haul up the water from the canal with. And then I shall know you're enjoying yourself instead of sitting here idly looking at the scenery and yawning your head off. Here, you let me steer, said the Toad, now thoroughly frightened. And then you can go on with your washing in your own way. I might spoil your things or not do them as you like. I'm more used to gentlemen's things myself. It's my special line. Let you steer, replied the bargewoman, laughing. It takes some practice to steer a barge properly. And besides, it's dull work, and I want you to be happy. No, you shall do the washing as you're so fond of it. I shall stick to the steering that I understand. Don't try to deprive me of the pleasure of giving you a treat. And Toad was fairly cornered. He looked for an escape this way and that, and saw that he was far too far from the bank for a flying leap, and sullenly resigned himself to his fate. No, if it comes to that, he thought in desperation, I suppose any fool can wash. He fetched the tub, soap, and other necessities from the cabin, selected a few garments at random, and tried to recollect what he'd seen in casual glances through the laundry windows, and set to. A long half-hour passed, and every minute of it saw Toad getting crosser and crosser. Nothing that he could do to the thing seemed to please them or do any good. He tried coaxing, he tried slapping, he tried punching. They smiled back at him out of the tub, unconverted, happy in their original sin. Once or twice he looked nervously over his shoulder at the bargewoman, but she appeared to be gazing out in front of her, absorbed in her steering. His back ached badly, but he noticed with dismay that his paws were beginning to get all crinkly. Now, Toad was very proud of his paws. He muttered under his breath words that should never pass the lips of either washerwoman or Toads, and lost the soap for the 15th time. A burst of laughter made him straighten himself to look around. The bargewoman was leaning back and laughing unrestrainedly till the tears ran down her cheeks. I've been watching you the whole time, she gasped. I thought you must be a humbug all along, from the conceited way you talked. Pretty washerwoman you are. Never washed so much as a dishclout in your life, I'll lay. Toad's temper, to which had been simmering viciously for some time now, flared and boiled over, and he lost all control of himself. You common low-fat bargewoman, he shouted, don't you dare talk to your betters that way. Washerwoman, indeed. I would have you know that I am a Toad. I am a very well-known and respected and distinguished Toad. I may be under a bit of a cloud at present, but I will not be laughed at by a bargewoman. The woman moved nearer to him and peered under his bonnet keenly and closely. Why, so you are, she cried. Well, I never! A horrid, nasty, crawly Toad, and in my clean barge, too! Now that is a thing I will not have. She relinquished the tiller for a moment. One big mottled arm shot out and caught Toad by a foreleg, while the other gripped him fast by the hind leg. And then the world turned suddenly upside down, and the barge seemed to flit lightly across the sky. The wind whistled in his ears, and the Toad found himself flying through the air, revolving rapidly as he went. The water, when he eventually reached it with a loud splash, proved quite cold enough for his taste, though its chill was not sufficient to quell his proud spirit, or shake the heat of his furious temper. He rose to the surface spluttering, and when he wiped the duckweed out of his eyes, the first thing he saw was the fat bargewoman looking back at him over the stern, and the retreating barge and laughing. He vowed, as he coughed and choked, to be even with her. He struck out for the shore, but the cotton gown greatly impeded his efforts, and when at length he touched land, he found it hard to climb up the steep bank unassisted. He had to take a minute or two's rest to recover his breath, and then gathering his wet skirts well over his arms, he started to run after the barge as fast as his legs would carry him, wild with indignation, thirsting for revenge. The bargewoman was still laughing when he drew up level with her. "Pat yourself through your mangle, washerwoman," he called out, and iron your face and crimp it, and you'll pass for quite a decent-looking Toad." Toad never paused to reply. Solid revenge was what he wanted, not cheap, windy verbal triumphs, though he had a thing or two in his mind that he would have liked to have said. He saw what he wanted ahead of him. Running swiftly on, he overtook the horse, unfastening the tow rope and casting off, jumping lightly on the horse's back, and urged it to gallop by kicking it vigorously in the sides. He steered for the open country, abandoning the towpath and swinging his steed down a rutty lane. Once he looked back and saw that the barge had run aground on the other side of the canal, and the bargewoman was gesticulating wildly and shouting, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" "I've heard that song before," said Toad, laughing as he continued to spur his steed onward with wind in its wild career. The barge horse was not capable of very sustained effort, and its gallop soon subsided into a trot, and its trot into an easy walk. But Toad was quite contented with this, knowing that he, at any rate, was moving, and the barge was not. He had quite recovered his temper, now that he had done something he thought really clever, and he was satisfied to jog along quietly in the sun, steering the horse along byways and bridle paths and trying to forget how very long it was until he had a square meal, till the canal had been left very far behind him. He had travelled some miles, his horse and he was feeling drowsy in the hot sunshine, when the horse stopped, lowered its head, and begun to nibble on the grass. The Toad, waking up, just saved himself from falling off by an effort. He looked about him and found that he was on a wide common, dotted with patches of gorse and bramble as far as he could see. Near him stood a dingy gypsy caravan, and beside it a man who was sitting on a bucket turned upside down, very busy smoking and staring into the wide world. A fire of sticks was burning nearby, and over the fire hung an iron pot, and out of that pot came forth bubblings and gurglings, and a vague suggestive stillness. Also, smells, warm, rich, varied smells, that twinned and twisted and wreathed themselves at last into one complete, voluptuous, perfect smell that seemed like the very soul of nature taking form and appearing to her children, a true goddess, a mother of solace and comfort. Toad now knew well that he had not been really hungry before. What he had felt earlier in the day had been a mere trifling qualm. This was the real thing at last, and no mistake. It would have to be dealt with speedily too, or there would be a trouble for somebody or something. He looked at the gypsy over carefully. Oh my God, I don't like that it keeps using that word, but I am reading it as wrote. I know it carries some bad stuff, chap. I'm just reading it as wrote. And they smoked and sat and looked at him. Presently they took out their pipe from their mouth and remarked in a careless way, "Want to sell that horse of yours?" Toad was completely taken aback. He did not know that the person was very fond of horse dealing and never missed an opportunity. And he had not reflected that caravans were always on the move and took a deal for drawing. It had not occurred to him to turn the horse into cash, but the person's suggestion seemed too smooth, the way towards the two things he wanted so badly: ready money and a solid breakfast. "What?" he said. "Me sell this beautiful young horse of mine? Oh, no, it's out of the question. Who's going to take the washing home for my customers every week? Besides, I'm too fond of him, and he simply dotes on me." "Try and love a donkey," suggested the person. "Some people do." "You don't seem to see," continued Toad. This fine horse of mine is a cut above you altogether. He's a blood horse, he is, partly, and not the part that you see, of course, another part. And he's been a prize hackney, too. He, in his time, that was the time before you knew him, but you can tell that he but you can still tell it on him from a glance, if you understand anything about horses. No, it's not to be thought for a moment. All the same, how much might you be disposed to offer me for this beautiful young horse of mine?" The gypsy looked the horse over, and then looked Toad over with equal care, and looked at the horse again. "Shillin' a leg," he said briefly, and turned away, continued to smoke, and tried to stare the wide world out of countenance. "A shilling a leg?" cried Toad. "Oh, if you please, I must take a little time to work that out and see what it comes to." He climbed down off his horse and left it to graze and sat down by the person and did some sums on his fingers, and at last said, "A shilling a leg? Why, that comes to exactly 4 shillings and no more. Oh, no, I could not actually think of accepting 4 shillings for this beautiful young horse of mine." "Well," said the person, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll make it 5 shillings, and that's 5 shillings, and that's 3 and 6pence more than a month's than the animal's worth, and that's my last word." Then Toad sat and pondered long and deeply, for he was hungry and quite penniless, and still some way he knew now not how far from home, and enemies might still be looking for him. To one in such a situation, 5 shillings may have very well been a large sum of money. On the other hand, it did not seem very much to get for a horse. But then again, the horse hadn't cost him anything, so whatever he got was a clear profit. And at last he said firmly, "Now look here, I'll tell you what we'll do, and this is my last word. You shall hand over 6 shillings and 6pence cash down, and further, in addition hitherto, you shall give me as much breakfast as I can possibly eat, and in one sitting, of course, out of that iron pot of yours that keeps sending forth such delicious and exciting smells. And in return, I will make you over my spirited young horse, and with all the beautiful harness and trappings that are on him, freely thrown in. If that's not good enough for you, say so, and I'll be getting on. I know a man near who's wanted a horse of mine for years." The gypsy grumbled frightfully, and declared if he did a few more deals out of that sort, he'd be ruined. But in the end, he lugged a dirty canvas bag out of the depths of his trouser pocket and counted out 6 shillings and 6pence into Toad's paw. Then he disappeared into the caravan for an instant and returned with a large iron plate and a knife and fork and spoon. He tilted the pot, and a glorious stream of hot, rich stew gurgled into the plate. It was indeed the most beautiful stew in the world, being made of partridges and pheasants and chickens and hares and rabbits and peahens and guinea fowls and 1 or 2 other things. Toad took the plate in his lap, almost crying, and stuffed and stuffed and stuffed and kept asking for more. And the person never grudged him. He thought that he had never eaten so good breakfast in all his life. When Toad has taken as much stew on board as he thought that he could possibly hold, he got up and said goodbye to the man, and took an affectionate farewell to the horse. And the gypsy, who knew the riverside well, gave him directions on which way to go, and set forth on his travels again in his best possible spirits. He was indeed a very different Toad from the animal of an hour ago. The sun was shining brightly, his wet clothes were quite dry again, and he had money in his pocket once more. And he was nearing the home of his friends in safety, and, most and best of all, he had a substantial meal, hot and nourishing, and felt big and strong and careless and self-confident. As he trampled along gaily, he thought of his adventures and escapes, and how when things seemed at their worst, he had always managed to find a way out. and his pride and conceit began to swell in him. "Ho, ho," he said to himself as he marched along with his chin in the air. "Oh, what a clever toad I am! There is surely no animal equal to me for cleverness in the whole world. My enemies shut me up in prison, encircled by sentries, watched night and day by wardens. I walk out through all of them by sheer ability coupled with courage. They pursue me with engines and policemen and revolvers. I snap my fingers at them and vanish, laughing into space. I am unfortunately thrown into a canal by a woman, fat of body and evil-minded. What of it? I swim ashore. I seize her horse. I ride off in triumph and sell the horse for a whole pocketful of money and an excellent breakfast. Ho, ho! I am the toad, the handsome, the popular, the successful toad." He got so puffed up with conceit that he made up a song as he walked to praise himself, and he sang it at the top of his voice, though there was no one around to hear him. It was, perhaps, the most conceited song that any animal had ever composed. "Oh, the world has held great heroes, as history books have showed, but never a name to go to fame compared with that of Toad. The clever men at Oxford know that all there is to be knowed, but none of them know half as much as intelligent Mr. Toad. The animals sat in the ark and cried, and their tears in torrents flowed. 'Who is it?' they said, 'there's land ahead,' encouraging Mr. Toad. The army all saluted as they marched along the road. What is it, the king or Kitchener? No, it was Mr. Toad. And the queen and her ladies in waiting sat at the window and sewed. She cried, 'Oh, look, what a handsome man!' They answered, 'It's Mr. Toad.'" There was a great deal more of the same sort, but too dreadfully conceited to be written down. These were some of the milder verses. He sang as he walked, and walked as he sang, and got more inflated with every minute, but his pride was shortly to have a severe fall. After some miles of country lane, he reached the high road, and as he turned into it, glancing along the white length, he saw approaching him a speck that turned into a dot, and then into a blob, and then to something very familiar. And a double note of warning, only too well known, fell on his delicate ear. "This is something like," said the excited Toad. "This is real life again. This is once more the great world from which I have been missed for so long. I will hail them, my brothers of the wheel, and pitch them a yarn of the sort that has been so successful hitherto. They will give me a lift, of course, and then I will talk with them some more, and perhaps with luck they may even end in driving up to Toad Hall in a motor car. That will be one in the eye of Badger." He stepped confidently out into the road to hail the motor car, which came along at an easy pace, slowing down as it neared the lane, and then suddenly he became very pale. His heart turned to water, his knees shook and yielded under him, and he doubled up and collapsed with a sickening pain in his interior. And well he might, the unhappy animal, for the approaching car was the very one that he had stolen out of the yard of the Red Lion Hotel on that fateful day when his troubles began. And the people in it were the very same people he had sat and watched luncheon in that coffee room. He sat down in a shabby, miserable heap on the road, murmuring to himself in despair, "It's all up, it's all over now. Chains and policemen again, prison again, dry bread and water again. What a fool I've been. What did I do to go strutting out by the country for, singing conceited songs and hailing people in broad day on the high road instead of hiding till nightfall and slipping home quietly by backways? Hapless Toad, ill-fated animal." The terrible motor car drew slowly nearer and nearer, until at last he heard it stop just short of him. Two gentlemen got out and walked around to the trembling heap of crumpled misery laying in the road, and one of them said, "No, dear, this is very sad. Here's a poor old thing, a washerwoman apparently, who has fainted in the road. Perhaps she became overcome by the heat, poor creature. Or possibly she has not had any food today. Let us lift her into the car and take her to the nearest village, where doubtless she has friends." They tenderly lifted Toad into the motor car and propped him up with soft cushions that proceeded on their way. When Toad heard them talk in so kind and sympathetic way, he knew that he was not recognised. His courage began to revive, and he cautiously opened the first one eye and then the other. "Oh, look," said one of the gentlemen, "she's better already. The fresh air is doing her good. How are you feeling now, ma'am?" "Oh, thank you kindly, sir," said the Toad in a feeble voice. "I'm feeling a great deal better." "Ah, that's right," said the gentleman. "Now keep quite still, and above all, don't try to talk." "Oh, I won't," said the Toad. "I was only thinking if I might sit on the front seat there beside the driver, where I could get the fresh air full in my face as soon as... I will soon be all right again." "Oh, what a very sensible woman," said the gentleman. "Of course you shall." So they carefully helped the Toad into the front seat beside the driver, and on they went again. Toad was almost himself again by now. He sat up and looked about him and tried to beat down the tremors and the yearnings of the old cravings that rose up and beset him and took possession of him entirely. "Ah, it is fate," he said to himself. "Why strive? Why struggle?" And he turned to the driver at his side. "Please, sir," he said. "Oh, I wish you would kindly let me try to drive the car for a little. I've been watching you carefully. It looks so easy and so interesting, and I should like to be able to tell my friends that once I had driven a motor car." The driver laughed at the proposal so heartily that the gentleman inquired what the matter was. When he heard, he said, to Toad's delight, "Bravo, ma'am. I like your spirit. Let her have a try, and look after her. She won't do any harm." Oh dear. Toad eagerly scrambled into the seat vacated by the driver and took the steering wheel in his hands, listened to the affected humility of the instructions given to him, and set the car into motion, but very slowly and carefully at first, for he was determined to be so prudent. The gentlemen behind clapped their hands and applauded, and Toad heard them saying, "Look how well she does it. Fancy a washerwoman driving a car as well as that, the first time." Toad went a little faster, and then faster still and faster. He heard the gentleman call out warningly, "Be careful, washerwoman!" And this annoyed him, and he began to lose his head. The driver tried to interfere, but he pinned him down to his seat with one elbow and put it on full speed. The rush of air in his face, the hum of engines, the light jumping of the car beneath him intoxicated his weak brain. "Washerwoman indeed," he shouted recklessly. "Ha ho! I am the Toad, the motor car snatcher, the prison breaker, the Toad who always escapes. Sit still and you shall know what driving really is, for you are in the hands of the famous and skillful and entirely fearless Mr. Toad." With a cry of horror, the whole party rose and flung themselves on him. "Seize him!" they cried. "Seize the Toad, the wicked animal who stole our motor car! Bind him, chain him, drag him to the nearest police station! Down with the desperate and dangerous Toad!" Alas, they should have thought. They ought to have been more prudent. They should have remembered to stop the motor car somehow before playing any pranks of that sort. Within a half a turn of the wheel, the Toad sent the car crashing through the low hedge that ran along the roadside. One mighty bound, a violent shock, and the wheels of the car were churning up thick mud of a horse pond. Toad found himself flying through the air with the strong upward push of a delicate curve of a swallow. He likened the motion as he was beginning to wonder whether he would go on until he developed wings and turned into a toad bird, when he landed on his back with a thump in the soft, rich grass of a meadow. Sitting up, he could see the motor car in the pond, clearly submerged. The gentleman and the driver, encumbered by their long coats, were floundering helplessly in the water. He picked himself up rapidly and set off running across the country as hard as he could, scrambling through hedges, jumping ditches and pounding across fields until he was breathless and weary and had to settle down into an uneasy walk. When he recovered his breath somewhat, he was able to think calmly. He began to giggle, and from giggle he took to laughing, and he laughed until he had sat down under a hedge. "Ho! Oh," he cried in ecstasies of self-admiration. "Toad again! Toad as usual comes out on top. Who was it that's gotten the Who was it got them to give him a lift? Who managed to get on the front seat and shake for the sake of fresh air? Who persuaded them into letting him see if he could drive? Who landed them all in a horse pond? Who escaped, flying gaily and unscathed through the air, leaving the narrow-minded, grudging, timed excursionists in the mud where they should rightly be? Why, Toad, of course. Clever Toad. Great Toad. Good Toad. Then he burst into song again and chanted with uplifted voice, "The motor car went poop, poop, poop as it raced along the road. Who was it who steered into a pond? Ingenious Mr. Toad. Oh, how clever I am. How clever, how clever, how clever." A slight noise at a distance behind him made him turn his head and look. Oh, horror. Oh, misery. Oh, dismay. About 2 fields off, a chauffeur in his leather gaiters who was with 2 large rural policemen were visible running towards him as hard as they could go. Poor Toad sprang to his feet and pelted away again, his heart in his mouth. "Oh my," he gasped as he panted along. "Oh, what an ass I am! What a conceited and heedless ass! Swaggering again, shouting and singing songs again, sitting still and gassing again. Oh my, oh my, oh my!" He glanced back and saw to his dismay that they were gaining on him. On he ran desperately, but kept looking back and saw they still gained steadily. He did his best, but he was a fat animal, and his legs were short, and still they gained. He could hear them close behind him now, ceasing to heed where he was going. He struggled on blindly and wildly, looking back over his shoulder at now triumphant enemy, when suddenly the earth failed under his feet. He gasped at the air, and splash! He found himself head over ears in deep water, rapid water, water that bore him along at a force he could not contend with, and he knew that in his blind panic he had run straight into the river. He rose to the surface and tried to grasp at the reeds and rushes that grew along the water's edge close to the bank, but the stream was so strong that it tore them out of his hands. "Oh my," gasped poor Toad, "if ever I steal a motor car again, if ever I sing another conceited song." And then down he went, and came up breathless and sputtering. Presently he saw that he hadn't liked and subscribed and rung the bell, and was extremely concerned by this, and did so presently. He saw that he was approaching a big dark hole in the bank just above his head, and as the stream bore him past, he reached up with a paw and caught hold of the edge and held on. And then slowly and with difficulty he drew himself up out of the water, until at last he was able to rest his elbows on the edge of the hole. There he remained for some minutes, puffing and panting, for he was quite exhausted. As he sighed, he blew and stared before him into the dark hole. Some bright small thing shone and twinkled in its depths, moving towards him. As it approached, a face grew up gradually around him, and it was a familiar face, brown and small with whiskers, grave and round with neat ears and silky hair. It was the water rat. And chat, there ends chapter 10 of The Wind in the Willows. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. I apologise for my stumbles and flubs. Seems that I was struggling a little bit this evening, but I hope that it hasn't detracted from your enjoyment of the story, for I have very much enjoyed reading for you. Of course, if you, like Toad, haven't liked and subscribed and rung the bell, then please consider doing so, because it really does help this channel. And of course, we will be back next week for the final 2 chapters of The Wind in the Willows. But for now, chat, I leave you here, and thank you very much for listening and watching. Thank you so much to my mods, of course, for coming and making sure the community is safe. And of course, thank you to all of you, everyone who has given memberships and or re-upped your membership as well. I appreciate you all. Chat, I hope you have a fantastic week ahead. I hope that I have kicked it off well, and that this is the beginning of something quite special. And of course, I will see you, as I say, I won't be back this Sunday for Expedition 33, but I will be back next Tuesday for more Wind in the Willows. If you have a story that you'd like me to read, remember to leave it down in the comment section below. And until then, chat, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.